Hello and welcome to Bat Flips and Nerds, the baseball podcast with a British twist. I am your host this evening, Russell Eason, and we have another interview for you today and another one with some slight Red Sox connection, but somebody who also has a massive connection to this podcast, someone who has been a guest. I think we're now on episode number 5 times that they've joined us on this podcast. Definitely a record, as they set records all around baseball with what they're doing right now. Delighted to be with Liam Carroll, who is now the manager of High A Greenville Drive, who has obviously also been part of the Salem Red Sox in the past couple of seasons, as well as the GB national coach, as well as many things in British baseball with the London Mets, or Bracknell, or Bournemouth, and many of other places in between. Liam, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you once again.
Thanks, Russell. It's great to be back. It's been too long, so really looking forward to the chat.
Yeah. So for our long-time listeners, most of you will know Liam, but I think it is kind of worthwhile doing a whistle-stop tour of since we probably last had you up to 2004. So, Liam, like, you were obviously, you have an American dad, a British mum, brought up in like the UK, but baseball was still something like that you wanted to do, even though you had very little access to it.
Yeah, no doubt. Just incredibly fortunate with there being enough British baseball where I was, and also my dad getting involved in various British baseball circles. I mean, really cutting to the chase, it was the British baseball giants, the likes of Gavin Marshall, Alex Malahudis, Nick Carter, who inspired me to want to go and play in the States. Went to Delta Community College where Nick and Gavin went. Realized soon into my coaching or my playing career that I wasn't cut out to be very good at playing. So by the end of my college career, had began to coach effectively, and rather than finishing my collegiate eligibility as a player, took an opportunity to join the coaching staff at UNLV. Spent in all 5 seasons there. That ended in 2010. There's national team involvement throughout this part of my career. 2010 to the last, until COVID, basically national team, BSUK Academy, High Performance Academy, some London Mets, as you mentioned, and then just incredibly fortunate, largely through relationships built, to have had the opportunity to join the Red Sox. This is now my 3rd season after 2 in Salem. Excited this year, as you mentioned, to move up to High A and join the Greenville Drive.
So yeah, obviously, let's start with Salem then. Like, that is this something that you, obviously, we know, I've spoken to you personally, is something you were very much aiming for as a possibility. You wanted to push as far as you could in this coaching and this managerial world within baseball. But for how long did you think it was a realistic target to get into like minor league baseball?
Really only the 2 or 3 seasons preceding getting hired. It was something I never thought was possible, as the walls of professional baseball were pretty solid, and if you hadn't had a professional playing career, it was rare that a coach got a look in, and that certainly changed dramatically in the last decade or so. Andrew Wright is our director, or our field coordinator. I met Andrew at the ABCA convention a few years back while he was still a college coach. Then he got in with the Yankees. Invited to apply there. So for the next 2 or 3 years applied, but it never really went anywhere. So, okay, this is cool. It's nice to have a conversation and interview. And then suddenly he moved to the Red Sox, and I ended up with a job. But it was really only, despite always having the professional baseball dream, it was really only something that became a legitimate goal within the last few years. And I think as the national team has success, especially since the advent of the World Baseball Classic and British baseball being under a microscope a little bit more, I think it always seemed inevitable that national teamers would get the opportunity with so many caliber people. And so no surprise really that more recently Drew has ended up in professional baseball as well. And I expect and hope that there will be more in the future.
Yeah, it's amazing to see this kind of like connection can continue to through, and because for everybody, it's almost in all regards, it's like if you can see someone do something, it becomes a possibility for like, this is something that I can attain to. We have players who want to be players in Major League Baseball. But for some people who are thinking that like, oh, my time is up, like there's no chance of being involved in this, there's still opportunities for people to continue to grow and develop, and it's amazing to see that. With you kind of coming into like that situation in A-ball, it was probably quite different to what you've been doing for the last few years with British baseball, where you're effectively chasing. I don't know. You're probably chasing and calling like 200 guys to be like, please come play at this baseball tournament, and then actually spending like a week with some guys, maybe 2 weeks with some guys, and getting to work out what do I do with these people? How do I get them to play the best baseball in like 2 weeks? To being like, oh, now I've got like a year to develop sort of players. How did that like mentality for you change, and how did that style of actually having coaching impact you in that first year in Salem?
You know what? It was a lot of similarities, but definitely the differences. And one of the things that is fantastic is just the caliber of the player, the depth of talent, and that myself nor any of our other uniform staff need to spend any time worrying about the players and where they come from. The scouts that we have are absolutely incredible. And the caliber of player is remarkable. That's obviously true across all 30 organizations. So to show up every day and have these elite athletes, elite baseball players, really is a privilege. The similarities, I mean, there are still people, and ultimately, while the baseball specifics are fun and of course they're critical, you're building relationships with people from different backgrounds, from different countries, with different likes and dislikes, different interests and disinterests. So that hasn't changed. That's just the same as running an academy session in Coventry. So I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I think while the difference of doing it every single day is the biggest difference, planning an academy practice for 120 kids in Coventry or in Milton Keynes and figuring out how it works and working with others, because it takes a village, working with others to figure out how to solve that problem so that the kids in Coventry or Milton Keynes have a great experience. That's very similar. And as a minor league manager, while I do have various hats I need to wear, arguably the biggest one is making sure that the schedule works every day so that our coaching staff can do their job so that our players can do theirs.
And I think about like some of the conversations that we had between the two of us sat in maybe like Pasiunks or Home Run House, where we were coming up with ways for you to analyze the baseball that GB could play with the limited amount of data that we have to work out like if we do everything small right, then we should win more games than like we lose, and we were looking for all of these small statistics. I imagine now some of that still is the same, but you have such a plethora of information at your like fingertips now. How do you kind of like work together with that transition? How do you start to think about, well, what's important and what's not important, even because you now have potentially too much data?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we as an organization do very well is bridge the gap between what's available and what we can crunch, if you will, to making that useful for the player and useful for the coach. As you've referenced, like anything imaginable, technology wise, data wise, analytics wise, is there or being built, or at least is an idea. And it was quite intimidating at first, having some insight into the new wave of how baseball works, but never having any hands-on experience. A little bit intimidating, thrown in at the deep end. But again, we have great education within the organization, great people that help bridge the gap. And each year we've got a little bit better. And that's enabled me to be a little bit better, ensuring that I can leverage the technology, leverage the data. And we're very clear on what we think is required in terms of being successful as a big league team, being successful as a big league player. And because we have that understanding, we can be very specific, very directed, very intentional about how we try and improve those things at the minor league level.
Yeah, and I think the Red Sox as a whole has had not necessarily like an organizational shift, but with they're changing at the top, and then the bringing in of people like Kyle Bodie. It feels that like this and was it just a Wilford and a few others to kind of actually bring this ethos across like the whole entire organization of like this is what we're aiming for and how we're going to like do it together. We had Kyle on here a few weeks back, and he really talked about culture being almost like the most important side of that. How have you seen like the culture of analytics or the culture of kind of like within professional baseball like be different to like that, to maybe that slight culture of coaching at a national team level?
I think the biggest difference from my perspective is, while of course every game we ever play, we want to win it, and we will play to win, but we're not going to do certain things at the expense of player development. At the end of the day, it's a bonus if in Salem we win. I don't think I lose my job if we have a losing season. And my first season we had a losing season. My second season we won more than we lost. Every time that you play a national team game tournament, you're trying to win. And that it is a significant difference. Now, where there's so many layers to that was it's been great how the national team success has evolved, and one of the reasons for that, I think, is having depth at the national team level. Looking at the most recent World Baseball Classic team, you did have options off the bench. You could play matchups a little bit based on the information that you have, and I never really had that privilege, I guess, that depth when I was managing the national team. And again, peeling back another layer, while there is all of those benefits in terms of depth at the national team level now, you don't necessarily have the data because while there is more money in the program, there's not as much money as the Boston Red Sox have. Hopefully, with the injection from UK Sport ahead of the LA Olympic cycle, Drew and his team can really start to leverage technology a little bit more to create those margins, because it's difficult to win an international baseball game, let alone one against Team USA or the Dominican Republic or Japan.
I think it's really interesting that you talk about the culture of not winning not being important, because I imagine that's also foreign to all of the players that you get, because you've got guys that have been coming out of college where they want to get to that College World Series, they want to get that kind of like that feather in their cap because it'll probably help their draft capital, but then you get them and it's like, okay, this is not as important anymore. Is that a difficult discussion to have? Are there some people that potentially struggle with the fact that like winning isn't the be all and end all anymore?
Yeah, I think everyone gets it. I think there's certain situations that become frustrating. I think a key note to address, it's not that winning is not important, it's that it's not as important as is something else. A great example, an easy example would be, let's say it's a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday game, middle of the week, which is when you're more likely to give a top prospect a day off. And it's a close game, and you know that they're the best bat you have on the bench, and maybe if they pinch hit in the ninth, your chances of winning the game improve. That priority player, that prospect, is not going to pinch hit in that situation, certainly not in the lower levels of the minor league. We have to respect the off day. Rest is critical to their development. Likewise, if a prospect was going through a slump and there might be a better option on the bench because someone else is hot, I'm not taking the prospect out of the game. So while in the moment there might be some frustrations in some corners about not pushing those buttons, certainly you hear it from the fans. Why are you not doing this? From the armchair quarterbacks. Everyone in the room, while there might be some frustration in the moment, really does get it. And I think ultimately we have a strong belief that all of the things that we believe are important, whether it's driven by data, whether it's a more traditional baseball thing, what we preach to our players, what we encourage our players to buy into, the reasons we draft and develop different players, winning will take care of itself.
No, yeah, that sounds like a really important thing to get through everybody. The thing that jumps to my mind sometimes is what things that you have to do manage that other people don't have to do is you have to take people on injury assignments potentially. They're coming down from like higher levels or even the highest level that they'll drop down to do that because of the proximity or just the right day to get somebody to play. Did you get anybody like major in either of your couple of years at Salem?
Yeah, we actually had Zach Kelly on a rehab assignment 2 years ago, and it was very cool. It typically wouldn't happen. I think it's very rare that a major league rehab assignment happens in low A. But Zach is from Roanoke, which is next door to Salem, and he specifically requested it. And what an experience that was for our players to rub shoulders, which they have some opportunity to do that during spring training. But to spend a week in the fire in the dog days of August, rubbing shoulders with a big leaguer and the chance for the players to pick the brain of that's incredibly powerful. And while we do have phenomenal coaches with very different backgrounds, some of which do include professional and big league backgrounds, I think it's a little bit different when a younger player gets to talk to an older player. Incredibly powerful. And while, of course, the primary reason for Zach being in Salem for a series was his own rehabilitation, it was massively impactful for our players too.
And everybody surely expects a nice lunch on Zach as well, yeah, or a nice dinner.
There was the post game spread was taken care of.
And I guess that's something. Obviously, you've only been part of Major League Baseball and minor league baseball since a lot of the improvements have been had on the minor league side, but you probably know, you've talked to players, you've worked with players who have been in, I don't want to say horror stories of the past, but like single A baseball must be a completely different world to what it used to be 5 years ago, let alone 10 years ago.
No doubt, and the changes were needed. They were arguably overdue, and incredibly important. And as you said, my frame of reference is non-existent, other than what you've heard. But it's safe to say that the players are looked after pretty well now, and that makes perfect sense given we want these players to become big leaguers. The hotels are pretty good, about as good as you can expect in the sort of towns that you're staying in. They get fed well, and of course, all those things add into increasing the chances that they can reach their potential. So while I'm sure there could be some things improved, and everyone continues to look for an edge, the sleeping and the eating arrangements are pretty good right now.
Yeah, I guess so. I think one other question I have around about things, say, how your career has progressed is like, are there things that you're coaching is, I feel, quite unique in certain scenarios, but also then you're doing the same things again and again and again in other scenarios. Like, what are you taking from the times that you were running like training sessions in like the David Beckham Academy and like in London to now how you're running those sessions in Salem or in the spring training as you are in Florida right now?
I think we are given a license to be creative. We know what we believe. We have certain methodological. Did I say that right? I don't know. Certain principles that we're going to adhere to because we believe that is the best way to acquire skills and get better at baseball. But within that framework, we're given flexibility. We're given, as I said, license to be creative, which I think is the perfect place to be. If you were coaching in Great Britain, I think all of us who've done that have needed to be creative because of the space, because of the equipment, because of the ratio of floor space to people. And then when you apply that creativity where the resources aren't necessarily unlimited, but they're plentiful, that becomes a lot of fun. Whether that's now, how can we make sure that we're investigating all avenues to develop a player, whether we're just trying to, because we're 100 games in, keep it fresh, or when the rain hits and we have to be forced into the cages or spend less time outside. It's been beneficial for me to have that background in British baseball, where I would argue that creativity is a prerequisite for being a successful coach in Great Britain. And then that also just helps push the envelope. We, I think this is an emerging theme. We believe what we believe to be true in terms of player development, and producing winning big leaguers and winning big league teams. but that doesn't mean that we're going to be complacent with where we're at. We're always going to try and push the envelope and find out even better ways to do what we need to do.
Without divulging any secrets here, like how bespoke would you think like the average person's like weekly training is? Is it kind of they're all 80% like all of the second basemen are doing the same thing, but then they've each got like 20% of their time doing something that's for that individual, or some sort of other ratio?
It's as bespoke as we can possibly make it, and I think if you were to watch from the stands, you might not be cognizant. You might think, well, they're all doing the same thing, but the subtle variation that is driven by the combination of the data tells us this, you need to work on this, and then what we as coaches see with our eyes and the conversations we have with different departments, the strength coaches input, for example, it becomes pretty nuanced. So it often looks like they're all doing the same thing, but the way that we set up their routines and their work on the field is very, very individualized. The thing that kind of adds a layer to it, especially during spring training where you have so many players, is themes will emerge where certain players can be bucketed together. And if you've got a critical mass of players that you can group together because they're all working on the same thing, then that makes it a lot easier to run a baseball session, and especially so during spring training.
Yeah, so how much have you seen like that stuff impact players that have come through with you, like to maximize the potential, to go for maybe talking about some Red Sox examples, things like Campbell, things like Gismani Garcia, and like Blake Wayhart. They've all come through, and I think as top kind of like prospects, and they're seemingly right now they're still on to be like everything that we thought they would be, or even more.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, great people with strong work ethic, very clear about their vision and understanding of the work that needs to go in. Obviously, then incredibly talented players. If you perform based on what the expectation or what the understanding is of what is required to be successful at the next level, then you're going to move up. I don't think that's a secret. I think that will be true for all organizations and from all organizations level to level. Combine that with their individual goals, which they'll have in all of the key areas of their performance. Pitching, obviously, a little bit more straightforward. Hitters, but then we'll have to add in the defensive and base running aspect as well. But they had goals set based on what they needed to do from what we believe to be important. They hit their goals, they moved up. And that is one of the most rewarding parts of the job. When you get to have the conversation after the game, to tell a player that they're moving up, that really is one of the coolest things that I've got to do thus far in my career in pro ball.
Yeah, and we'll stick with a couple more Red Sox specific questions to make John and a few others happy. Like the system that the Red Sox have right now is widely regarded as one of the best systems in baseball by all of the and by MLB prospect analysis and by Fangraphs and by other things. How does having like Anthony and Campbell and Mayer and even someone like Cassis who's in the majors already, having those young players, how does that impact the people further down like the chain to be like, hey, like I'm in the same system with like these guys, or these are the people that like I'm aiming to be better than?
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and there is a tremendous balance within our organization of while that's pretty cool, I get to be on Roman's team. With the competitive aspect, that they're all really good. There's so much focus on the big three, rightfully so, but there are so many good players, and it's really cool to see the depth, and it's there on the pitching side too. And it really is just exciting. I'm excited for the breakout game this week. Fortunate to be involved in that, just as a great opportunity for these young men to showcase their abilities. Obviously, we've had the big three in big league camp, and they've been playing in big league games throughout spring training, but not everyone's got to do that. So for the other ones, especially to be playing under the lights on national TV is pretty exciting. It really is. I do occasionally just I see an item of the Red Sox gear that we're given, and just kind of start laughing. Like I work for the Boston Red Sox. We're really good. We have some amazing players, and today I get to go and help them try and get better.
Yeah, and obviously with the Salem Red Sox being the Red Sox as well, it's kind of you have that ablazoned all the time to give you that reminder. Obviously now you're going up to the drive, you're gonna get a whole new set of uniforms to put that through. So have you built yourself a nice closet of baseball uniforms over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest differences, I didn't coach third base in Salem, so I almost never wore the jersey. I coached our third base coach, Ozzie Chavez, who's the new manager in Salem, absolute rock star. Um, he wasn't with us for a few days, so I had to coach third base, so I had to wear the jersey. Otherwise, give me my Red Sox hoodie. So this year I will be coaching third base, so I will have to wear the jerseys. Uh, Greenville has a phenomenal set of uniforms, so that's the bright side of it. I'll at least look pretty good thanks to other people's design skills this season. But we are the Red Sox top to bottom. It's the Red Sox that pay my bills, not the Greenville Drive, and all of the Red Sox gear we're given every spring training will be worn loudly and proudly throughout the season in Greenville.
Yeah, I imagine you've got a Red Sox big kind of like duffel bag that you probably carry around as much as you used to carry around those WBC ones that we you got back in the day.
Exactly right, and it's one of the coolest things. They're the org is incredibly generous with what we are given, and it's spring training is always cool. Just showing up for the first day of school, so to speak, and seeing your friends, seeing the players. But it is always a pinch me moment when you see a locker for the first time in February, full of new gear.
And one thing that you have as a manager in a low A or low division in the minors is that you get to get sample some new rules in baseball. Like how does it feel to kind of it's wrong to say guinea pigs because of like but you are sampling sometimes a lot of the rules that are thinking about kind of like going into the majors. How have you had any thoughts on kind of having to do challenges yourself? Obviously that's existed for a while, but like the ABS system, how have you felt being involved with
Yeah,
these
we
rules?
don't have it in low A. I don't think we have it in high A either. The biggest one for us has been the pitch clock. Uh, Always interesting. They don't have the pitch clock in the complex leagues, so it's often a player's first experience when they get to low A. So that can be interesting. I thought as a kind of quasi baseball traditionalist that I would not like the pitch clock. That whole thing, baseball doesn't have a clock, but I love it. It's absolutely fantastic, especially when you factor in that in low A, you're going to have some very, very young players. You're going to make more mistakes. Players in the big leagues are just straight up better than they are in low A. That's not a surprise. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to have days where we can't throw a strike. But at least we have the pitch clock to keep things in order. And I think it's better for the fans too. So I am a huge fan of the pitch clock. I watch as much international baseball as I can. So watching European tournaments last year when I could, it was like WBSC needs the pitch clock. European baseball needs the pitch clock. It makes such a difference and keeps fans engaged. And ultimately, we do need fans to come and watch games. So go pitch clock.
I'll tell you that single A, double A, triple A, and NBL baseball in the UK needs to pitch clock.
Let's do it. Let's find a way. Even if you got someone on a stopwatch on the side.
just shouting at people like 5 seconds.
Yeah, stop. No.
Obviously in that first year, was there any standout moments of kind of like obviously that first time that you are managing like a game? What was kind of like the pinch me moment that happened to you kind of like in that game?
Well, it's casting my mind back. I was definitely nervous. It's probably the most nervous I'd been in a baseball uniform since the World Baseball Classic qualifier in Brooklyn. I can't point to any specific moment. There's things that stand out from that first half or first half of my first season. And I mean, seeing Roman Anthony as a very young player with very little experience in the grand scheme of things, be so good and move so fast. And now he's in big league camp and a stone's throw away from his big league debut. It's just, how cool is that? And just generally speaking, just these players are so good. And I just remembered, I get to do this again tomorrow. You have a WBC talking about Brooklyn again, and that was a good team we had in a team of good a tournament of good teams. Whether that was on other side, facing Jason Marquis twice, or on our side, Jazz Chisholm was our shortstop. But it lasted a week, not even a week. So just that feeling of I get to do this again tomorrow is really cool and really special, and continues to be inspiring.
Will Roman be probably the first player that you've like actively coached that might make that major league, or is there somebody already up there?
Nobody already up there. We had Zach Kelly for 5 days. Doesn't count. Ryan Fernandez came through on a rehab assignment as well, and was Rule 5 2 years ago, I think it was, and been in the big leagues. It doesn't count. So as and when the first true Salem Red Sox makes the big leagues, it's going to be pretty cool. And I wouldn't want to put money on who that was. For one, that would not be allowed. So I'd never do that. But there's an exciting crew, and I mean, Justinson Garcia, the password, another one that spent significant time with, who's now on the 40-man. Luis Perales, another one that has come through Salem, another 40-man player. It starts to get a little bit more real. I remember our mental performance coordinator, Jake Chaplin, at the end of our season, it might have actually been after our last game of the 24 season, commented, next year is going to be different. And it's starting to sink in why he told me that, because we're getting close to the point where the players you spend significant time with break through and get their big league debuts. So looking forward to that, and hopefully the game times work out where we can watch it in the clubhouse.
Yeah, and so talking about player progression, your progression, you had 2 seasons down in A, and now you're up to High A. How was that call for you? The call from the manager's office, you probably was during the holidays, so it wasn't a walk into the office the same way you would have done with your players.
Yeah, really, really cool. I was ready to go back to Salem and would have been perfectly happy to do so. It was a great experience, and we had a really great season in terms of how things are supposed to work. In terms of, I referenced earlier, the daily schedule, big part of my job. It just worked, and the staff in Salem this year wouldn't have been identical, but would have been pretty similar. So would never say I would be comfortable, but certainly confident in going back into Salem, and it's going to work again, and we can get even better. So it does feel a little bit like the first day of school again, going into a new environment where it's a new coaching staff. It's a new stadium. It's a new front office. How's this going to work? One of the most exciting things is, while there'll be players that I haven't yet got to be teammates with, there will be a lot of players that we've had in Salem these last 2 seasons, and we've had some tremendous players come through, some really cool people come through. So that continuity is really exciting, and I don't necessarily view it as a promotion. I think if you have a job in professional baseball, it's awesome, and the work that goes on in the Dominican Academy is phenomenal and is critical. The work goes on here in Florida during extended spring training, and then the complex league season and the bridge season is critical, and some of our best people are in those levels. But I guess it is a promotion of sorts, and that's cool too. And people just rave about Greenville. I got to spend about 3 days there in January, it lives up to the hype. The stadium's amazing. The town's amazing. So looking forward to those aspects as well.
Yeah, I think what you say is perfectly right, that in a lot of these institutions there are so many players and coaches in the certain areas that make the difference that you've never even heard the name of, because kind of that's not where the fan focus kind of like is directly aimed towards. But it would be remiss of me if I didn't ask you personally, has the dream shifted? Like, it's not the dream of being in professional baseball now. It is the dream of being a major league coach or manager.
Yeah, I haven't quite decided, but there absolutely is the pull of the big leagues. It would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd be on all the
I
free
just
tickets you'd
haven't
be
decided
giving.
yet. Yeah, I need to decide. I don't think I need to decide today. I remember vividly the first year that the High Performance Academy existed. Will Linton, who spearheaded that program, did a great job with the lead-off event, which was more of a classroom and testing day. And there was a session about goal setting, and the players were a little bit nervous to speak up on their goals. And Gavin spoke. He was there, and Gavin is a phenomenal goal setter and has achieved many of his goals. But I remember saying, just really to try and spirit the conversation a little bit, I will manage Great Britain baseball in a World Baseball Classic. If we count the qualifiers, then that happened, and really not that long later. So I think I need to decide whether I want to work at the big league level, knowing that if I decide to do it, then I probably will.
Yeah, and I will echo that sentiment, Liam. Everything that you have put your mind towards, I've seen you strive towards and actually achieve. So personally, I would love to see you dream to go that far, because then not unprofessionally, we can ride on your coattails for even longer.
Want some free tickets, ain't you?
Yeah, it's a little bit easier to get to Boston than it is to Salem or Greenville. But but let's talk about Greenville. You say it is a historical town with some major significance when it comes to kind of like the motor industry. But obviously the stadium that they have there is pretty much a Fenway replica. Like, how did that feel? Kind of, I mean, you had a look at the stadium yet to kind of to get a feel of what that's going to be like. To be like, oh, actually, this is the point now where we start to care really about that defense and get your players used to having to deal with that monster.
Yeah, I think we're in a privileged situation in the org where Portland also has a monster, Greenville has a monster. So the players they hopefully are more prepared when they do get to Fenway, having had that experience. It's an amazing facility. This year, the Greenville Drive celebrate 20 years. I think the stadium's been around for 19 of those. You couldn't tell. It is pristine. The front office group, the ownership group, Mr. Brown and his team, they do a phenomenal job. It's interesting. We actually had a meeting just a couple of days ago with our big league base coaches, Huddy and Flo. Huddy at third, Flo at first. And one of the things we were talking about is, as a third base coach, navigating not necessarily the monster, but that the left field line is hidden from view from the third base coach's box. And just how do you navigate that in Boston? Because I'm going to have to navigate that in Greenville. And that's something for fans to look out for this year, I guess, is be prepared for your runners as they round third base to actually be outside of you, as you might be on the baseline, or even spend a little bit of time in fair territory. So as long as the players know that they should expect sometimes to be running around you rather than inside you, it's the smart way to do things. And it's going to be one of those nuances of not just coaching third base for the first time regularly in a little while, but doing it where these nooks and crannies make it more challenging. So it's exciting. It's different. And I guess wrapping up that thought, not that it was the primary crux of this segment, it's really cool that we're getting to spend that time with our big league coaching staff. It's one of the benefits of a spring training site where major and minor league are all on the same footprint, which isn't always the case. If some didn't know that, for example, the Blue Jays and the Yankees have spring training sites where the minor leaguers and big leaguers are in different places. So we're in the same place here in Fort Myers, and just yesterday got to spend about 30 minutes picking the brains of our big league coaching staff, which was great.
No, that's amazing. I feel like if I would personally was you, one of the pinch me moments that I would be having is just looking at how pristine all of those fields are. To when I was lucky enough to at Arizona and Miami during the WBC last year to just go and look at like a professional field and just be like, oh, this is what baseball could be, and not the turnip fields that we've played on, where you can be like, oh, that ball is going to bounce and it's going to come up to basically just about my chest height, or not see a ball that bounces immediately over you or scuds right between your legs. That would be the pinch me moment for me.
No doubt. Well, come to Fort Myers sometime. And then, I mean, I know that BSK have been searching for a new groundskeeper forever. Hopefully they find one, because I think Farnham Park could be as good as our backfields are, as long as the money's being spent. And it sounds like it is going to be spent. But as long as the standards are in the right place, then there's no reason for a field not necessarily to be the same caliber as Fenway Park, but to be as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah, I do have to say that the fields of Farnham are beautiful. Yeah, obviously we're used to kind of the second fields that we get here, there, and everywhere, where we've got football pitches to deal with, and we've got
No doubt.
the occasional dog malfeasance to have to worry about. Something that you don't have to worry about as as manager going forward.
Hopefully not.
So now you're in spring training, as you've said a couple of times. What's the difference between, like, for you coaching now compared to when it comes to the season at hand?
So I've been here for 3 weeks. Very little so far to do with managing. I've been an infield and outfield coach and a base running coach for the last 3 weeks. We have players cycle through days of different intensity. So they'll have a high day where they're really getting after it. They'll have a low day, which they'll still work, but it'll be lighter in duration, fewer reps, a recovery day, and then a moderate day in between. So we're preparing and delivering activities suited to those intensity levels. And some of our other coaches responsible for assigning each coach to each group on each day. So we all get to work with the players regardless of, we're not only working with infielders on high days, we're working with infielders on all of their days. We're working with outfielders on all of their days. So that's been the primary part of the job. Minor league spring training actually only officially began last week. So 3 weeks here, but minor league spring training began a week ago. More focus on base running now, more focus on team defense. So lots
Running
of instruction.
PFPs, yeah.
PFPs, I've not worked with a pitcher yet. They tend to do their own thing. I interact with the pitchers when we get to live BPs towards the end of the day. And we just continue to add layers. Next up, we will begin playing games. March 12th is the day that we start playing other teams. So the managerial side starts to enter the fray, and that's really just in lineup construction. We're not pushing buttons in spring training. We're just creating lineups so the players know where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there. But soon enough, we'll be finishing spring training and have a better sense of our team. We'll want to make sure that the first week or so of the season is pretty much dialed before it starts. So the managing layers of that onion is starting to rear their head.
And do the coaches take some secret BP hacks themselves when everybody else has disappeared?
Some do. I think that we have so many leaderboards. There is a leaderboard for coaches exit velo. I'm not on it, but I've not taken a swing. Maybe I would be if I took a swing.
Yeah, you got to have that, or you got like arm speed on off the mound or from third to first or something like that, yeah.
If you can think of a leaderboard for anything, we've probably got it.
That's brilliant because we have a few things over here where we have Tom all the time saying that like he thinks that he can beat people from home to first based on some of the statistics that we have nowadays, and I'm like, you don't realize how fast some of those guys actually are, even if you think that they're slow.
No doubt. Although I'd like to see Tom try. I think there should be video.
We'll have to work our magic for the next London series in next year's time to see if we can get him on the field and time him after taking some hacks. I think it would be.
I would think about making the trip back if I could for that.
You'd be like, oh, can I have like 2 days off in the middle of the season just to watch some English
The
idiot?
important things.
Yeah, it's a personal issue that I need to return to just to be laughing as Pringle falls over as he tries to run to first base as fast as he can. William, it's been an absolute pleasure to have a chat with you. Obviously, kind of like this season is going to be hopefully amazing for you and for all of your players. This is the time normally where we would invite our guests to say where they can find them online and stuff like that, but that's not quite the your forte. We should be watching Greenville Drive with renewed or new eyes to basically see how they're doing. I feel a lot of British fans watched saw how Salem was doing, even though it wasn't necessarily the team that we supported as a whole. And now we will switch to Greenville to be our next team to support.
Very kind. Very kind.
So yes, as always, listeners, you can find more from us on @batflips_nerds on Twitter and batflipsandnerds.com. And if you were listening to this, you do now know that you can watch these videos on YouTube. So if you wanted to see me in my resplendent GB jersey from the 2016 World Baseball Classic, then or you can do so. I imagine Liam's one is probably kept somewhere very safe, yeah?
No doubt. No doubt. Treasured.
Cool. Cheers, Liam. Thank you very much for your time. And listeners, I hope you have enjoyed.
Thanks, Russell.